Hello and welcome back to another Flutter tutorial. In this video, we will be making a simple chat application using Socket.io in Flutter. So this is the demo of the app that we are going to build, where we will be logging with two users in different devices, and like you see in the demo, they will be chatting between each other. Okay, so this will be a simple app. So this tutorial is going to be a little longer, so please bear with me. Okay, so let's start. So this is my main.dart file where I have an empty container set as home. Now I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to name it Socket.io chat and a new file, login screen. So we'll be creating a login screen first. We'll build the UI first and then we will do the functionality. Okay, so we will need a chat user screen and a chat screen. Okay, so login screen. So let's create the login screen. So we will keep it simple with just a text field. Okay, so a state and init state, and override the build method and return the scaffold with an app bar with title. Let's say let's chat. Okay, and return the state. Okay, so these are all basic things. And on the body, I'm going to set the alignment to center and a padding of 30, and with a column, main axis size minimum, and children with a text field. Let's declare the controller so that you can get the value from the text field. Okay, initialize it and provide the controller and the alignment. Let's give some decoration for the text field with a border, outline, input border with a border radius. So let's set the border radius to 6 and set the fill to true. Okay, and a fill color, I'm setting it to colors.white, and the content padding of 20. Okay, so we have our text field now. Now let me add some spacing, and let's add a login button, which is an outline button with a child text login. Okay, on press of the button, we'll do it later. So on press of the button, we have to navigate to the chat list user screen. So let's go ahead and create the routes file. So here we are going to declare the routes. So routes, static routes. So let's declare the login screen first. Okay, and the initial screen will be login screen. Okay, so let's go to the main.dart file and replace the home with routes. So that will be routes.routes, and initial route is the login screen, correct? So let's refresh. Okay, there is our login screen. All right, so the next screen we are going to build is the chat list user screen, where we will list the users to which the logged in user is going to chat. Okay, so let me just copy the login screen and paste it in the chat user screen and rename it to chat user screen. Okay, and change the route ID, and we don't need the text field here, so we will need a list view here to list the users. Okay, so we'll be doing it in a short while. Now we need to declare the route for the screen. So let's go to the routes.dart and add another one, chat user screen, and return the chat user screen. Okay, now let's go to the login screen and add the function login button tab, which will be called on press of the login button, and another function to open the chat list user screen. So that will list the users that the logged in user is going to chat with. Okay, so that will be chat user screen dot route ID. Okay, so that will open the chat user screen. All right, then we will call this function inside the login button tab. Okay, and don't forget to call the login button tab. Okay, so on press of the button. All right, so it's going to the next screen, right? Okay. Now to list the users, I'm going to create a model for each user. So let's go ahead and create a file named user.dart. So this will be the user model. So class user with ID, name and email, and a constructor that will accept all these three parameters. Okay, and two factory methods, user.from JSON, which is a map string dynamic, and we need to return the user with the mapped values. That will be ID, name and email. Now we need another method to convert back to JSON, convert the object back to JSON. Okay, so to JSON with ID, name and email. Okay, now I'm going to create a new file called global. So to make this video simple, I'm going to save some of the values in a global class. Okay, so import the user, and the class is named G, and static list of users, which are the dumb users that we are going to use. So in your case, you may be getting these list of users from your own APIs. Okay, so let's initialize the dummy users here. So user will be A and B, only two users. Okay, so when A is logged in, he will see B, and when B is logged in, he should see A to chat with. Okay, so let's write another method to get the user to chat with. So if A is logged in, we should return all the users other than A, and when B is logged in, we should return all the users other than B, right? Okay, so that will filter it out. So we are filtering based on the name here. Okay, so in real scenario, this could be coming from your own database. Okay, so let's try this one. Go to the chat user screen and declare a list of users. I'm going to say chat users, and we need to initialize it. So chat users is equal to, so call get users for, and the logged in user. So let's set the logged in user when the user is actually logging in, right? So let's set the default user to A. So that will be g.dummy users of 0, that will be A. And if the user is logging in with B that is not equal to A, then the logged in user will be B. Okay, so in real scenarios, this will be coming from your database and you will be validating against that. Okay, so let's keep it simple. So that will be our logged in user. So as I said, if A is logging in, this will result in a list of users other than A, and if B is logging in, it will be list of users other than B. Okay, so let's create a list and show the list of users. Okay, so that will be expanded with a list view.builder, and item count will be chat users.length, and user. In each item builder, let's get a user and return a list style with title, which is a text with value user.name, and subtitle, let's display the ID and the email. So I'm just displaying the user ID to know what is the user ID for that particular user, so which will be useful when we are doing the chatting. Okay, so in real scenarios, you may not display the user ID. Okay, I forgot to set the children for this column, so let me cut that and add children. Okay, so let's log in. Okay, there is some issue here, so let's look at the console. So some null exception is there, so let's call, we forgot to call the init dummy users. Okay, so let's log in. Okay, yeah, so when A is logged in, it's showing B. When B is logged in, the list is showing A. Okay, so let's add a button on the top right to log out. So there is no logout button. So let's add the close button, and one press of the button, we will close this window and open the login screen. So let's write a method, open login screen, and change it to login screen dot route ID. Okay, and on press of the button, let's call this function and pass in the context. So A logout, B logout. Okay, so that's also working. Okay, now let's focus on the chat screen. So when the user click on one of the users in the chat list, it should go to the chat screen, right? So we have created a chat screen file. So let me copy the content in the login and paste it there. Okay, and rename the class name to chat screen. Okay, and the route ID to chat screen. Okay, we will clean up the UI later. Now we will go to app.quicktime.io and create a JSON model. So I have made a tutorial on how to create JSON models. So I'll be providing the link to it in the description. So let's create the model. The model will have chat ID, to, from, message. So to will be the user which the logged in user is chatting to, and from will be the logged in user, and message is the actual message, and chat type, it can be single chat or group chat or whatever value you want. In this tutorial we'll be seeing single chat. Okay, so on the right side you can see the model is generated. Let's copy that and create a new file. I'm going to name it chat message model dot, and let's change the model name as well here. Okay, let's copy that, paste it. Okay, now we have the model. Now let's go to the chat user screen, and the list will be chat message model, and let's rename the variable to chat messages. Okay, let's import that, and let's remove the list. Okay, later we'll be creating the list with the list of messages. Okay, now a variable to chat user. So let's save it in the global. So let's go to global.dart file and create a variable to chat user. So we'll be saving the logged in user and to chat user in a global variable. So you can implement this in your own way. I'm just saving it in a global variable to keep it simple. Okay, now let's add the route for the chat screen. Okay, now let's go to the chat list screen, the chat users list screen, and on click of the item in the list, which is the user, we will open up the chat screen. Okay, so on tab, we need to open the chat screen. So assign the to chat user to the clicked user. Okay, and add a method open chat screen to open the chat screen. Okay, that will be push named. Okay, so I need to remove this icon, we don't need this here. Open chat screen with the context, and let's go to the chat screen and assign the variable here to chat user is equal to g dot to chat user. Okay, so on the title we will display if the user is online or not with the name. Okay, so let's create a chat title which extends a stateless widget, so we don't need a state here, and a constant constructor. So this is going to accept key and to chat user, so that will be chat user, and the third parameter is the user online status. Okay, we'll be displaying if he is online or not. Okay, and declare the variables. The first one is the to chat user, so let's add a enum user online status. So that will have 3 values. First is connecting, online, and not online. Okay. Now let's declare the variable for user online status. That will be user online status. Okay, and that should be to chat user. Okay, now let's override the build method and create the UI for the chat title. So the chat title will have a container. So I'm going to return a container with child. Let me set the alignment to center, and child will be a column with children. Let me set the cross-axis alignment to center. And the first one is a text which shows the user's name, and second one is his online status. Okay, so let's get the text for that. So let's write a new function, get status text. So if the user online status is equal to user online status dot connecting, let's set the online first. So if the status is online, let's return the text online. So if he is not online, let's say not online. Otherwise, let's say connecting. Okay, so paste it there. Let's give a style, font size of 14, and colors dot white 70. Okay, so now we have our chat title widget. Now let's go back to the chat screen and replace the title with our chat title. So that will be chat title, and let's pass in the parameters. So that will be g.toChat user and the user online status. So let me declare a variable user online status. So let me initialize it to connecting. Okay, so initially it will show connecting. All right, so later when the user is connected, we will update. Okay, so I misplaced the logout icon here. So let me remove that and place it back in the chat user screen. Sorry about that. And it should open the login screen. Okay, I wrongly removed it previously. So let me place it back. Okay, so that should open the login screen. Okay, so let me log in again. Okay, working good. Okay, now let's create the bottom chat area for this chat screen. So let me write a function bottom chat area that's going to return a container with padding 10 and a child, which is a row, and that's going to have a text field. So write a function chat text area that's going to return an expanded widget with a text field as a child. So let me set the decoration. So input decoration with enabled border with a circular radius of 10 and a focus border with the same radius. Okay, now let me set the fill to true and the fill color to white with a content padding of 10, and in text let me say type message. Okay, and let's add the text field and an icon button which should say send. So that's going to have an icon, and on press of the button we will do it later. So let's add the bottom chat area in the UI. Okay, sorry, I misplaced again. So it should be on the chat screen, correct? So let me remove that and cut the two functions and paste it in the chat screen. Okay, now let's copy the bottom chat area and we need to add it to the column, but before that let's add the list. So that will be the list of messages. So let me paste that and change the array to chat messages, and that will be chat message model. Okay, so each row will have just a text. So just to keep it simple, we will just show the message. Okay, and so let me change that to chat user. Okay, so both should work. Now let's add the bottom chat area. Okay, now refresh the UI, login. Okay, we have some error here, so that's because I didn't initialize the chat messages array. So initialize it, refresh the UI, login. Okay, so everything looks good. So now we have the basic UI for chatting. So here we are going to use socket.io for chatting. So you need to go to the pubspec.yaml file and add this package. I'll be providing the link to this in the description. Okay, so this package supports the socket.io client for Flutter. Okay, so you can use your own package, whichever supports the socket.io client, then that should work. Okay, now let me show you how to install the socket.io server. So you need to have a node installed first. So I have installed it in my system. So I have a local server. So you can follow any of the tutorials, which is easy for you. So make sure to install Node.js and Socket.io and follow the tutorial. Okay, so they have the sample code here. All right, so I have installed everything in my system and my server environment is ready. Okay, now let's write the client side code, the Flutter side code for connecting with the socket. Okay, so for that I'm going to create a new file. So let me name it socket utils, and let's write the imports. The first one is a .io. Second one, we need the chat message model, the user.dart, and the other socket.io package. Okay, now let's declare a variable server IP. Since this is running on my local system, so my server is going to run on the local host. Okay, so localhost represents the local server in iOS, and in Android the localhost IP is 10.0.2.2. Okay, so in real world this will be your server IP. Okay, so we are going to communicate with port 6000. So that also it's up to you. You can use your own port number. Okay, now let's create the connect URL. That will be static string connect URL. So that will be the IP colon port. So here it is server IP colon server port. Okay, now let's declare some variables which we will be using when we are communicating with the server. So let's say those are event names. Okay, so for this also you can use your own names and your own values. Okay, so I'm going to use the first event as receive message. Okay, and the second event I'm going to say is user online event. So check underscore online. All right, so the first event is when the message is being received from socket, and second one is to check if the user is online. So let's declare two more variables, integer variables, to identify if the message is sent or not. Okay, which will have values 1001 for not sent and 1002 for sent. Okay, and another variable to identify the type of chat. So in this tutorial we will be doing single chat. Okay, so let me name it single underscore chat. Okay, now a user, and let's declare the socket.io variable socket and socket.io manager. Okay, now let's write a function init socket that's going to be asynchronous, and this is going to be initiated by the logged in user. Okay, so let me make it underscore from user and assign it, and let's print connecting from user dot name. Okay, now let's write another function. I'm going to call it init, and that is also an asynchronous function, and let's initialize the manager. That will be new socket IO manager and the socket as well. So call await manager dot create instance and pass in the options. So write another function to get the options. So the first option is a map of string. So let me say user map. So this is the user's information who is connecting to the socket. Okay, so let's send the user ID. and return the socket options with the connect URL, and optionally enable logging, and transports, that should be transports.websocket. Okay, and as a final parameter, which is a query where you can send the extra information. Okay, so that is our user map. All right, and call the function init in the init socket. Okay, so we have our basic setup ready now. So we have initialized the socket by using the manager.create instance, so that will return the socket with a port 6000. Okay, but how do we know if the socket is connected or if there is an error, right? So for that, let's write some functions. So let me call set on connect listener, and I'm passing in a function, and inside that I'm going to call socket.onConnect, which is an inbuilt function. So this will be called when the socket is connected. Okay, so I'm going to say onConnect and pass in the data to the caller, and we can have so many callbacks. So let me write another function, so that is going to listen to the timeouts. Okay, so that will be set on connect connection error timeout listener, and I'm going to pass in a function and change the function to on connection timeout. Okay, I have some error here, so let me remove that and add it again. Socket dot on connection timeout, and call our function on connection timeout with the data. Okay, and the next function is set on connection error listener, and pass in our callback, and inside that call socket dot on connection error and call our method with the data. Okay, and the next callback is set on error listener and pass in our function similarly. Okay, and get the callback from the socket, and if there is some error, we're going to call our function with the data. Okay, and now the next function is set on disconnect listener, so we'll be getting a callback when the socket is actually disconnected. Okay, so that will be socket.on disconnected, and when it is disconnected, we are going to call our function on disconnect with the data. So now we have the basic callback set. Okay, and finally we need to close the connection. So close connection, and we are going to check if the socket is not null. Then let's say print closing connection, and call manager dot clear instance with the socket instance. Okay, so that's going to close the socket. Okay, now let's go back to the chat user screen, and here is where we are going to connect the socket. Okay, so let me declare a boolean variable. I'm going to say connected to socket. So initially it is set to false, so the socket is not connected, and a string. I'm going to say connect message, and let's initialize it to connecting. Okay, now I'm going to write a new function, connect to socket, and let me print who is connecting. So print, let's say connecting logged in user, and let me print out the name and the ID. So g dot logged in user dot ID. Okay, now let me go to the global class that we created, and I'm going to save this socket in a global variable. So write a new method init socket, and declare a variable socket utils, and if the socket utils is null, we are going to initialize it. Okay, new socket utils. All right, now let's go to the chat user screen and call g dot init socket. So that will initialize our socket utils, and the next method we are going to call is g.socketutils.init socket. So that is going to initialize the socket with the logged in user, and the next method is socketutils dot let's write a method in the socketutils connect to socket, and we actually didn't connect the socket, right? We initialized it, and I'm going to check if it is null, then we will return. Otherwise, call socket.connect. Okay, so that's going to connect the socket. Okay, and call that method. That will be g.socketutils.connect socket. Okay, so that's going to connect the socket. So the next thing we are going to do is call this method in the init state. So copy connect to socket and paste it in the init state. Okay, now we need to listen to the callbacks, correct? When the socket is connected and disconnected and similar kind of events. Okay, so socket utils dot set on connect listener. So let's write that function. Okay, and the next one is socket utils dot set on connection error listener, and the next one is set on connection error timeout listener. So let's write that method and pass in the data. So let me make it simpler. Okay, and the next method is socket utils dot set on disconnect listener. So pass in the data. Okay, and the next one is set on error listener. So when some error happens, this method is going to be called. Okay, so pass in the data. All right, and okay, I think we have all the methods now. Now let's go to the onConnect method, and when the socket is actually connected, we will set the connected to socket variable to true and message to connected. Okay, and when there is some connection error, we will say connection error and connected to socket to false. And the next one is, let's copy that and paste it in on connection timeout, and the message change to connection timeout, and on error it will say connection error, and when it is disconnected it will say disconnected. Okay, so we have the basic messages. Now let's go to the build method and add a text widget. So that is going to say if socket is connected, it will say connected. Otherwise, it will say the connect message. So initially it will be connecting, right? Okay, and later when some event occurs, it will update the message. Okay, now we have the basic setup ready. So let's go ahead and refresh the app and log in. So I have some error here. So let's see what is that error. Method onConnect was called on null, so that means the socket is not initialized. So if we go to the socket utils, so okay, so our order is correct. So init and socket is an asynchronous function, correct? So we should add a wait. So we should wait for the socket to be initialized. Okay, so you can see those are our synchronous functions, and we need to add a wait and wait for it to complete. So you can see that error is gone, and it's showing connection error because our server is not running, and it's trying to connect to a server which is not running, so it's showing connection error. Okay, now let's log some values in each callbacks. So that will be on error and on disconnect. Okay, now let's refresh the app, log in again. So you can see on error is called and the message says it could not connect to a server. So which is good because our server is not running. Okay, now let's switch to the server side. So create a new file. So this file should reside in your server. Okay, it's not inside your Flutter project. So this should be in your server. So I'm naming it server.js. So we are going to create a Node.js Socket.io server here. So make sure you have already set up the environment. Okay, and you need to install the Express package as well. So if you go to the internet, you will get all the documentation for installing the Node.js and Socket.io server. Okay, so let's do some simple scripting. We need to have the Express and we need to have the HTTP package and also the Socket.io package. Okay, so let's declare the events like we did in the Flutter side. So the first event is on connection. So these are all reserved events for Socket.io. Okay, so you cannot change it. So the value should be connection and disconnect. And the main events, so these are the events that we are going to use. These are our custom events. Okay, so I'm going to say user event is user online. So it's the same event that we declared in the Flutter side, and single chat message. And the sub events, I'm going to say sub event receive message. So this is the event that we declared in the Flutter side. So the next event is user connected. Okay, and the port is 6000. So it should be the same port as in your Flutter project. Okay, or you can change the port, but make sure you have the same port in the server. Okay, and the message send status, and we have a user map here which we'll be using to store the users. And on each socket connection we are calling a method on each user socket connection, on each user connection. And let's write a print method. Okay, let's just printing a line, and I'm going to say socket connected socket with socket.id and the user who is connecting. So we will get it using socket.handshake.query. Now we need one more method, Stringify to JSON. So that will convert the data that is coming in to JSON format. Okay, so let me use it in the print statement. Okay, so that will print out the user that is connecting to socket. Now go to terminal and run the server using node and your file name. So we have some issue here. So the issue is because I didn't add the function keyword. Okay, so now the error is gone, but still the server is not yet running. Okay, so that's because we didn't make the server to listen to our port, right? So we need to call the function server.listen and the listen port. Okay, now let's save it and go back to the terminal and call node server.js. So now the server is running on port 6000. Okay, now let's restart our Flutter app, log in, and you can see it is connected. So in the log also you can see it is connected, and in the server logs you can see the user that is logged in. Okay, perfect. Now if the user logs out, we need to close the socket connection, correct? So log in, and if I log out, the socket is actually disconnected, but we are not listening to on disconnect in the server. So it should be inside each user connection. Okay, so function on disconnect and pass in the socket and call socket.on on disconnect. So that's a reserved event. Okay, and print disconnected with the socket ID. and I'm gonna call socket dot remove all listeners for this socket. Okay, save it, and you need to pass remove all listeners for this event on disconnect. Okay, now save it and restart the server. So whenever you make changes, make sure you restart. Log in. Okay, log out. So you can see disconnected. Okay, now let me move this close connection to the dispose callback of this class. Okay, now restart the app, start the server, log in. So if I log out, okay, you can see the disconnected message, right? Okay, so you can see the disconnected message in our console as well. Okay, now let's go to the server.js file, which is our server-side script, and get the parameter from the socket connection. Okay, so we'll get through socket.handshake.query. So dot from means we are sending the key from Flutter, right? So that's the logged in user ID. Now let's save the value in the user map with the key as the user ID. Okay, so the map is socket underscore ID, which is a key, and the value is socket.id, and let's add that to the user map. So the key will be from user ID and the value will be the socket ID map. Okay, so let's write the function add user to map, and the parameters are the key, which is user ID, and the value is the socket ID, right? Okay, so user map dot set key user ID and the value is the socket ID map. Okay, all right, now let's add the function to print the online users. So that will be the length of the user map. So print online users, that will be the size of the user map array. So dot size. Okay, let's copy that and paste it there. So when each user is connected, it will print the number of online users. So restart the server and log in. Okay, now you should see 1. Okay, so when disconnected, we are not actually removing the user from the map. Okay, so we will do it later. So before that, I forgot to mention something in the beginning of the tutorial. So if you are using HTTP for your server, make sure you add users clear text traffic in the Android manifest in the application tag. And similarly for iOS, you should add this NS transport security key in the info.plist. So let me show you this in the Xcode. So let me open the iOS folder, open the Xcode workspace, and if you go to info.plist, you can see I added that key, allow arbitrary loads to true. Okay, so I forgot to mention it in the beginning of the tutorial, sorry about that. Now let's try to log in with 2 different devices. So still it is showing online users 1, so let's fix that. So it is identifying based on the user ID, correct? So let's try that again. Disconnect, restart the server. So log in from Android with A and B from iPhone. Okay, so let's go to the global.dart. So the ID was wrong, both A and B were having the same ID, so that's why. So let's restart the app and restart the server as well. Okay, log in with A on iOS. Okay, log in with B on Android. So now you can see there are 2 online users. Okay, now let's go to our server file and let me print out the map. Okay, and let's now try to send messages to each other. So let me add a function on message. So when each user is connected, we are going to register our custom event to the socket. So that will be socket.on, and our event is receive message, right? Okay, add it, and the callback function will have the chat message. Okay, now I'm gonna wrap the rest of the operations here inside a single function. I'm gonna call it single chat handler and pass in the socket and the chat message. So let's write the function. Okay, now inside this function I'm just going to print out the message, whatever is coming from the client side. Okay, so let's say on message and print out the chat message. So stringify to JSON and chat message. Okay, now let's go back to the Flutter side and add this event from the Flutter side in the socket utils class. Okay, so let's write a new function. So the function name, let's say send single chat message. Okay, then it should have the chat message model and the user, to which user we are sending. Okay, let's print sending message to, that will be to chat user dot, let's print the name and ID, that will be dot ID. Okay, now I'm going to check if the socket is null. So if it is null, we're going to say cannot send message, and we are going to return from there. Otherwise, if the socket is initialized, then we will say socket.emit with the event name. So event name should be similar to the one in the server. Okay, so make it static constant and use the same event name here. Okay, and the arguments should be chat message model to JSON. Okay, now we have the function. Now let's go to the send button, and I'm going to check if the text is empty. So let's get the text editing controller for that chat text box. Let's initialize that. Chat text controller equal to new editing controller, text editing controller, and assign it to the text field. And we're going to check if the text field is empty. So if the text is empty, we are going to return. Otherwise, we will call the single chat message method in the socket utils and pass in the chat message model. And the chat message model will have chat ID, so that can be a unique ID from your server. Okay, for now we will set it to 0, and 2 will be to chat user ID dot ID, user dot ID, and to user online status. Let's set it to false, so that's not important here. And the message will be chat text controller dot text. Chat type, let's set it to single chat. Okay, so now we have the necessary values here. So let me copy the whole thing and create a new function and paste it there. Okay, send message button tab. Okay, and let's pass in the, so we don't need the user here in the socket utils, right? Because the chat message model will have the to username, and the socket utils will have the logged in username. Okay, now let's restart the app and also restart the server. Okay, so clean up and restart. Alright, login with B. Okay, online users 2. Now let's try sending a message. Okay, hello. Okay, now we got the message here. So the next thing we have to do is, so here the from is null, so we need to set the from ID. So that will be logged in user dot ID. Okay, now let's send the message again. Okay, still the logged in user is null. Okay, let's try restarting the app. Okay, app is restarted now. Okay, let's log in with B, and let's say hello. Okay, now we have the from and to user IDs. Okay, now let's go to the server. Okay, now let's go to the on single chat message, single chat handler in the server, and let's try to get the user ID. So let to user ID is equal to chat message dot to, right? Okay, then from user ID is equal to chat message dot from. Okay, now we have the we have both the user IDs. Now let's try to print it out from user ID and to user ID. So we are chatting from user ID to user ID, right? Okay, so we have the values here now. Now let's try to get the socket ID for the to user, so that we can send messages to that socket. So let me write a new function, get socket ID from map for this user, and pass in the to user ID. So function and pass in the to user ID, and that will be, let's get it from the map. So let user map value is equal to user map dot get, and pass in the to user ID. Okay, so let's pass in the to user ID, so that will be $to user ID. Okay, then we should get the socket ID for this user. So if the socket ID is undefined, so if the user is not logged in, then we will get undefined from the map, right? So return undefined, otherwise we are going to return the user map value dot socket ID. So remember, we had added with the value socket underscore ID, right? The socket ID will be in the key socket underscore ID. So we are going to check if the return socket ID is undefined or not. So if it is undefined, that means the user has not logged in yet. Okay, so that means the user online status for this user, the to user, is actually false, right? So chat message dot to user online status, so that I'm going to set it to false. So let me check the Flutter side. So that will be to user online status. Okay, there is a typo, so let me correct it. Okay, so that will be user online status. Okay, all right. Okay, now the key is online status to user online status. Okay, so let me copy that again and paste it there. Okay, I'm gonna set it to, so that should be status message not sent, or whatever value you can set it. So that should be used to identify it there. So that should be, I'm setting it to false. Okay, so that should be good. Okay, so that means the user is not connected, and we are going to return from here. And let me print user not connected, chat user not connected, and otherwise that means it is, the user is connected, and we are going to set it to true. And let's write a new function to send a message to this socket. So I'm going to say send to connected socket, and I'm going to pass in, we need the socket, and the second one is to user socket ID, to which user we are going to send, and the event, and the last one is the chat message. So what is the value we are going to send? Okay, so let me write that function send to connected socket, and let's have all those parameters. Okay, and call socket dot to, and we need to give the socket ID, so that will be to user socket ID, and call dot emit, so that will send the message to that socket ID. And let me change that to event, and the message you want to send, that will be the chat message. Okay, so convert it to JSON, don't forget that. Okay, all right, now we have everything set. All right, now okay, so we are sending the value to the corresponding socket ID, and the other user should get it. Okay, now let's go to the Flutter side and go to the socket utils, and we are gonna need a new function to receive the message from the server, right? So we need to listen to that event. So set on chat message receive listener, and let's pass in our function. Okay, on message received. So similar to server, I'm gonna call socket.on and make sure we use the same event. Okay, so the event name is receive message. Okay, so we're going to use the same thing on our Flutter side. Okay, and call on message received. That's our function with the data coming in. Okay, all right, now we need to call this function. So let's go to the chat screen. So this is where we need to listen to the messages from the server, right? So let's write a new function in its socket listeners, and that's going to be an asynchronous function, and call g.socketutils.set on chat message receive listener. Okay, and let's write our function, and that accepts the data and pass in that function. Okay, and let's print here on chat message received with the data. Okay, now we have everything set. Now let's go to the end state and call this function. All right. Okay, now we have to restart the app. Okay, we have some issue here, so that should be status. Okay, good. Okay, let's we need to go to the server and restart the server as well. Okay, we have some syntax error here. Okay, that's semicolon. Okay, now it should be good. Okay, the error is gone. Now let's log in from the app. Log in with A. Okay, now let's go to Android. Log in with B. Okay, connected. Okay, you can see online users too. Now let's try to send a message. Okay, the values are there. All right. Okay, and in the Flutter log you can see the values. So it should be on chat message, so there is no message there, so it might not have triggered. Okay, we'll fix that. By the time, let's add the other logic to add the message to the list. Okay, so that will be chat message model from Json with the data, and let's write a new function, process message with chat message model, and add each message to the messages list. Okay, and call set state, so that will be set in the list. Okay, restart the app. Okay, let's clear the logs and log in with A in Android and B in iOS. Okay, let's send a message. Okay, yeah, let's see. Okay, the process message. So we need to call the process message inside the list, right? So in the send message button tab, let's add the process message method with the chat message model, and let's restart the apps, log in. Okay, let's go to the chat area and add a message. Okay, so that's added to the list. Let's go to the Android, send a message. Okay, so that will receive the message on the iPhone. Okay, so both are receiving, so everything is working good, right? So the single chat is working. Now it's just to format the UI to identify if it is from your side or from the other user side, right? So let's write a new function, check online, to check if the user we are chatting to is online or not. So it will be similar to what we have done so far. So we will just change the event names, and we'll send the values accordingly. Okay, so for that we will call the code similar to what we did with single chat message. Okay, and we will change the event to check online. Okay, and the user data model is the same. And let's go to the chat screen and listen to this event check online. So let me write another function to get the value from the server when we are checking online. Okay, our function is on user status. Okay, so let's change the event back to, so that's an event that we are going to send from the server. Okay, so make it similar in Flutter, event user online, and the event that we are receiving from the server should be, let's say, from the server is user connected. Okay, so we should listen to that. Okay, so that is user connected, so is user event user online, so that's what we are listening to. Okay, so the server should send that event. So let's write a new function on the server, check online, and function check online, and pass in the socket, and similar to on message, we should listen to whatever Flutter is sending, so that should be check online. So Flutter is sending check online, so listen to that, and let's change the function name to online check handler, and let's write that function online check handler, and pass in the socket and the chat message. Okay, and let's get the to user ID from the chat message, so that will be chat message dot, let me change that to chat user details. Okay, dot to, and let me print out that value, checking online user to user ID. Okay, now let's get the socket ID for this user. So if he is online, it should be a value other than undefined, right? So if it is undefined, then the user is not online, then we need to send the event to Flutter, correct? Let's change that to a boolean value. So if it is undefined, the is online boolean will be true, and let's set the user online status. So chat user details dot, that will be user to user online status is equal to is online. Okay, and we need to send the message back to the client socket, correct? So let me write a function send back to client, and call. So let's let me write it there. Okay, and copy those parameters, and we need to call socket dot emit with the event and the message. The message should be a JSON. So stringify the chat message to JSON, and we don't need the user socket ID here. Okay, now let's call that function and pass the event and the socket. So the event should be is user connected, so that's what Flutter is listening to, right? Okay, let's paste that and pass in the chat user details. Now let's go to the chat screen and call this function. So g.socketutils.set on online user status listener. Okay, and the function, let's print the values, the data. Okay, now let's get the value into the model. So that will be the chat message model. Okay, and so Okay, so we will get the data in to user online status, right? So if it is true, that means the user is online. So set it to user online status dot online, or we'll just do it like this using the ternary operator. Okay, user online status dot not online, it is false. Okay, put it inside the set state so that it will refresh the UI. Okay, so that we are showing it in the header. Now let's write a function check online that will call the function in the socket utils. Okay, g dot socket utils dot check online and pass in the chat message model. So let's copy that and paste it, and we don't need the message here. You can remove the key if you want. Okay, so we just need to send only the data that we want and call the function. Okay, now let's log in. Let me restart the app and restart the server as well. Okay, logged in as B and logged in as A. Okay, so it's showing not online. It's returning false. So let's see what is wrong in our server side. So here we're sending the ID, everything is okay, but okay, so socket ID is there. So let's go to the server.js file and see what is wrong here. So there is a socket ID. Let's try to print it out. So online socket ID is to user socket ID. Okay, so let's restart the server and see what is wrong. Okay, restart the app and log in. Okay, two online users. Okay, it's returning still false. So we have the socket ID here. So the is online, it should be not equal to, right? So if it is not undefined, that means the user is online. Okay, now let's restart the server and the app as well. Okay, log in again. Okay, click on. Okay, now it's showing online, so it's working good. Now we logged out A and let's see. So it's showing connecting, but it's returning true because we haven't removed the user from the user map in the server, right? So let's go to the server.js file and we need to write a function that remove the user from the map. So function remove user with socket ID from map, and we need to pass in the socket ID. Okay, so we need to find out the user with that socket ID from the user map. So for that, so let's declare a to delete user and loop through the user map. Select key of user map, and we need to get the user key, right? So key 1 will return the values. So user map value dot is saved in as key socket underscore ID. So if it matches, we are going to return the to deleted user, which is the key. So key of 0. So that's a user ID. So let's print out the user ID to delete user. So deleting user. So that's a user ID. And let's check if it is undefined or not. If it is not undefined, we can remove it from the user map array. Correct? And let's print user map and also print the online users. So it should be reduced by 1. Okay, so let's call this when the user disconnects. Okay, and pass in the socket ID. All right, now we can remove the other listeners as well. So let's copy the event name. Let's copy the event name, sub event receive message, and the other event is user connected event, so let's remove that as well. Okay, so let's restart the server and the app, and let's try login in 2 devices. Okay, so both are showing online. Now let's log out from the iPhone, and you can see deleting user 1001 and the number of online users is 1. Okay, now let's see. Okay, B is showing connecting, so it's not updating properly, but it's returning false, right? So let's see what is wrong. Okay, so we are updating the value properly, maybe it's not updating the UI properly. So let's try to override the set state, and we'll update the UI if it is mounted. Okay, let's restart the app, login again. Okay, now log out from the iPhone. Okay, number of online users 1, so now it's showing not online, so it's updating properly. Okay, all good. Now let's log in and try sending a message. Okay, all good. Okay, everything is good now. Now let's make the UI a little bit better. So in the chat message model, I'm adding a boolean is from me. Okay, so which I'm not parsing from the web service, but adding it to the chat message model when a message is sent, and so it will be true when it is sent from Flutter. Okay, and when the chat message is received, I'm setting it to false, so that means it's receiving from the other user. Okay, you can implement it in your own way, in your own logic, so I'm just making it simple. Okay, and I'm checking if it is from me, then I'll just change the color. So if it is from me, it is green, otherwise it's gray. Okay, now let's try that. So restart the app, login, let's try sending some messages. Okay, it's not changing the color, so let's see what is wrong. So let me go to the chat message model, so that should be this dot is from me. Okay, then it will initialize. Okay, I think now it's good. Hello. Okay, now it's updating. Okay, working good. Now you can customize it in your own way. Now let's give some padding for that. Okay, 20 padding, and if it is from me, I'm setting the alignment to top left. Sorry, if it is from me, let's set it to center right and center left, otherwise. Okay, so that's okay. So how to create the chat bubble and all, I'll be providing the link to the source code in the description. You can go through that. So I'm not extending the video too much. So our primary goal is complete. So the single chat is working good. Okay, but as you see, it's not scrolling, right? So let's create a scroll controller which is attached to the chat list controller. Okay, so let's initialize that. Okay, and initial scroll offset to 0, and let's write a function. So chat list scroll to bottom. Okay, so this function will scroll the list to the bottom. So a timer with duration milliseconds 100, and in the callback function we're gonna check if the chat list controller dot has clients, chat list controller dot animate to. So the offset is chat list controller dot position dot max scroll extent, and duration, let's set it to milliseconds 100, and the curve, so curves dot decelerate. Okay, now let's call this function when after the process message. Okay, and when the message is sent and when it is received, right? Okay, let's see if that is working. Okay, so we forgot to initialize, we forgot to link the chat list controller to the list, right? So copy that and go to the chat list controller and provide the controller there. Okay, restart the app. Let's see if that's working. Okay, send some messages. Okay, now it's working, scrolling up, right? Okay, so that's working good. So if you want, you can remove the listeners when this screen is getting closed. So I'm overriding the dispose method for this class, and I'm setting the g.socketutils dot so let's write a function remove listeners and remove these two listeners. I'm setting it to null. Okay, and call this remove listeners in the dispose method. Okay, so that's all in this video. If you like the video, please don't forget to like, subscribe and share with others. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video. Until then, bye.